in the next parts. Well, let's see. I don't know if there are, let me see if maybe some questions or something in the meeting chat. No questions so far, so everything is okay, right?
Yeah, it seems it's okay. Or maybe someone would like to unmute and ask a question. If so, please raise your hand.
Okay,
I think we can go on.
great. Thank you so much, Paul. Okay, let's see. So we're over here. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So, yeah. Now, let me just remember that we were talking about historical facts. So those are some of these, okay, here. So this is an historical context, and this is about a 500 years journey, which is called Albertus disk. I don't know if you can see this. Let me see. This is one Albertus disk. I hope you can see. Please let me know if you can do that. This is it. It is a Albertus disk. It has two disks actually. One smaller, which is this one, and one bigger, which is that. Okay, which is over here. Let me show you. That's Albertus disk. Okay, as you see here over here, it has the alphabet, right? So actually, I can just uh, adjust this. I'm turning around and try to catch those to match the A's. Yeah, over here. So this is the Albertus disk, and as you see, the capital cases are in the external or larger disk, and the lower cases are in the smaller disk, right? So I can just turn around, right? Yeah. So this is called the Albertus disk, and uh, this is very useful tool. I'm gonna show you. You can also see over here the Albertus disk. This is a different version. This is maybe more basic, right? I did it. I make this, so which is really fun when we are teaching this kind of things with to the different students. So they love doing these kind of things and also sharing some secret messages. So we're going to talk about this because it was invented by Leon Battista Alberti, and it was about 500 years ago. Okay, this is important because with the this is cipher. We can say that we are going to use this as a cipher or encrypt information. We can use this is really simple, but we can create similar to this one as a polyalphabetic encryption, right? So it is really useful, and it was created by this guy some years ago, and he used the polyalphabetic cipher. It used multiple substitution alphabets, making cipher more resistant to frequency analysis. So this is another important concept that we are introducing over here: frequency analysis. Okay, just keep in mind that because we are going to mention in the next slides. Well, so this is a mechanical device. As you see, you can just clockwise move clocks or counterclockwise, and it works. Actually, it has different math over here concepts, mathematical concepts over here. We are going to mention some of them, and it is a mechanical devices, two rotating concentric discs. It's over here. You can see. I hope you can find this template. I don't know. Just put on Albertus disk and download the PDF. Just cut it, and you're gonna get your Albertus disk. Well, so you can use this to encode and decode messages mechanically. Okay, Renaissance impact. So transformed cryptography from simple substitution into a more secure systematic practice. So as a legacy for this Albertus disk is that Albertus principles laid groundwork for modern encryption algorithms and key-based systems. Again, our key and algorithms concepts that we mentioned previously are over here, or we recall those two concepts because those are important. We know that this might be public, but we don't want this to be public, okay? At least if we have only one key. This is about remember the frequency analysis that we mentioned over here. So on this part, you see the frequency. This is just one example, and I'm going to mention a little bit more about that. So just let me say that here we are going to talk about the dynamic substitution and frequency analysis. This was the previous concept that we mentioned. And dynamic substitution, it's the new one where we are when we talk about dynamic substitution is when we change the substitution alphabet during encryption hides frequency. Alberti, the guy who invented this, pioneered this idea by rotating those two ciphertext mid-message. So this looks really simple, and it means that you can hide information just rotating the smaller disk, okay? And that we call dynamic substitution. If you send a message and at any point, probably at the middle of the message, you change the key. I'm gonna show you. But if you change the key, then it means that you are going to rotate the disk, and then you will have a different letters associated to the new part of the message, right? And but why we are going to do that? Because we have this topic which is called frequency analysis. It means that you can do frequency analysis to the literature in general or messages might be um, might be I mean or messages might be attacked using frequency analysis. And that is because, as you see over here, for example, oh no, sorry, this one over here, in this case, this is some just some numbers over here. I took actually this picture from this book, the code book. This is sync book. You can find, I don't know, in different websites. And this means that E is the most frequent letters or the common letters. Actually, E, you see E, T, A, N, O. E, what is T? Yeah, T, A, N, O. A, N, O over here. Why? Because those have the highest bars, right? Okay. So common letters like A, T, A, and AO leave statistical fingerprints. It means attackers count symbols frequencies to reverse engineering the mapping. So, in other words, if we use or attackers use frequency analysis in a simple plain text in a plain text, we can use frequency analysis and probably we can get the plain or the original message. And that's an issue, a huge problem, right? We don't want that all information might get in people who maybe are going to use the information to do any kind of things, right? Well, but wait. So we were talking about frequency analysis, dynamic substitution, but we don't know or we want to know how substitution works. So each plain text letter is replaced by a fixed ciphertext, as over here. For example, I'm gonna what again? What is A? Yeah, over here. Okay, so now this is my original Albertis configuration, right? This is A and A match, and then we say that we are not rotating the disk. But if I want to replace a letter, for example, hello, right? Or not simple, hi, just HI, okay? So I'm gonna just turn around. I'm gonna do this clockwise. I don't know. I'm gonna just do, let me move, yeah, the smaller one, okay? I'm gonna do just one, simple, right? And now, let me show you. If you see over here, a capital case is matching with Z, right? Lowercase over here, right? So I move just one, right? I turn around just one letter. So when I do that, and I'm gonna hide, hi, remember, just say hi, right? I'm just going to, actually, I'm gonna do that. So I'm gonna hi, which is over here. This is the plain text. And I'm gonna, after I'm moving or turning around one letter, just one letter, remember? So it means that now hi, let me find it. Uh, I'm gonna I'm gonna look for the H capital case, which is G. Let me see. I'm gonna try to show that. Mm, right? You can see over here, right? Which is G. In my case, it's G. So now this is G, right? And I is H. So now the news or the ciphertext is just JH. That's it. And now we substitute the high, which was the plain text, to JEH, which is the ciphertext. Remember, we turn around the disk, the smaller one, clockwise, just one. Okay. Okay. It means I'm going maybe to move forward. Let me. It means that that is gonna be our key because we only turn around clockwise one letter, right? Okay, easy, easy peasy, perfect. So the same letter always maps to the same symbol, preserving the patterns. But we didn't change anything else. And as you should notice that the message is really short, right? It's just hi. And we didn't change or we didn't apply the dynamic substitution. We only keep the key as one. Okay. Well, that is how substitution works. Let me let me mention a little bit more about this breaking patterns, and it is because how it breaks, right? So repeating words, as over here, we remember we mentioned the O, and T over here, right? Those are repeated words, and letter pairs leak structure over time. That's that's it's simple because and also it's true because if you send the message using even the same key, which in this our case was one, and you just send a lot of different messages, eventually any attacker can do this frequency analysis, and then he's going to find, or this guy is going to find that you have a frequency analysis, and then probably he can get the key, and also uh, if you don't change the key, so probably this guy can get all the entire amount of information that you sent, even if that was encrypted. But if you didn't change the key, so it's going to be just a similar frequency analysis over here, and then he's going to reproduce the new frequency analysis, but with under the new key value, which was in our case one. Okay, so pattern recognition turns ciphertext back into plain text, which is something that over here, after this guy do this frequency analysis, or if he find the key, so he just go over here, find that the G corresponds to the H and H corresponds to I. So this guy is going to get all the information, okay? So the key inside static substitution, as we did previously, is vulnerable to statistical attacks, right? So eventually, this attacker can get the key value. Dynamic substitution raises the bar for cryptanalysis. Okay, it means that if you send, for example, high power, for example, right? Power is over here, then this is gonna be a different letter, right? I don't know, x1, x2, and so on. But if in this case you change, for example, k2, so this part of the message is different to this one, and then you are applying some dynamic substitution. This is a simple example. Actually, you can find a little bit more complex substitution examples. Okay. Well, let's see. Okay, let me see. Question. I don't see any questions so far. So let me mention about this part, the algorithm. Remember that we have those two different components, the algorithm and the key. So should the algorithm be secret? Well, actually, we have a Kirchhoff's principle, which states a crystal system should remain secure even when everything except the key is public, right? So again, we don't want that the attacker get this number because it's our key, right? We want to keep that secure. We want to keep that private. That's why currently there are different initiatives and projects and algorithms to keep the key secure. Okay, because everything. So it means that even the algorithm might be public, right? So we have to protect the key. So this is the secret algorithm, secret key, but we have a system security, right? And also we have on this side, on your right hand side, we have the public algorithm are going to be associated to the secret key. And even this, we will have a system security, right? So the algorithm might be public. Yes, the algorithm might be public. The problem is that we don't want, or the main issue is that we want to keep our key secure. Okay. Well, I don't know if maybe somebody was open and was on mute. So let me know if there is any question, please. Is there any question?
Yes, would someone like to ask a question? All right. I think we can
Okay.
continue.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Okay, great. So let's move on and then talking about math. Remember that we mentioned that this Albertus disk has math? Yes. And we call that sometimes clock arithmetic. Okay. So numbers wrap around a fixed models like hours on a clock face. Similar to this, if you check this, Albertus disk is like a clock, right? Well, so it has the math in this for this kind of things or tools are called clock arithmetic. Well, so we will use this definition, which is a congruence relation over here, A congruence V module N. Means A and B share the same remainder when divided by N. Okay? Let me see. Maybe we can. I think maybe we have an example. Let me find it. Yes. Oh, yeah. I have one simple example. Let me open over here my. Well, so for example, I'm gonna put over here the example. Think that we want 26, which is gonna be n. Okay. 26 is going to be the value of n. Why 26? Because we are referring again to this Albertus disk. And if you count this, we have 26 elements. This is for one alphabet. So if we want to encode or encode the information, we will have a function similar to this. A function encryption, which is depends on key or k, and X is going to be our plain text. So we define the congruence relation X, which is the plain text or the element of the plain text, plus key, which is going to K, which is going to be the key, and then we have module 26. Oh, sorry. Let me see. I can move it. I don't remember how. There you go. Okay, 26, right? This is, we can use this notation over here, yeah, just to keep this over here. There's the same one. And then we have here the function to encrypt information using the Albertex disk. right? Let me show you. But because maybe you are wondering, hey, Javier, if we have encryption function, we have a decryption function. Yeah, of course, that we have the decryption function, which now is going to be y, because y is going to be the encrypted information or the cipher information. Then we have y, which is going to be the encrypted information. Oh yeah, and here it's going to be minus k, right? Because now we are going to do the inverse operation. And then we have over here module 26 because it's the same actually, right? The model has to be the same, right? And then we have the encryption and the decryption functions over here for one just a simple tool such as this Albert disk. Well, let me move on because Um, yeah, those are the basis for the encryption. This is one of the most simple functions. There are others, but this is one of the most simple functions using module or congruence relation. Sometimes we can also define the modular exponentiation forms, which are very important or are the core of many modern cipher systems. Okay? Well, so congruence relation let us work with finite number spaces, making complex encryption operations computationally feasible. Okay, this is a little bit more, not too much, but a little bit more complex example using again the encryption and the decryption, right? So you can make this your Albertus, you can use your Albertus disk, and then you will have, for example, this plain text that this is going to be like some steps, right? So here we have start with a readable message such as hello. Key selection, it means that you turn around, I don't know, clock or counterclockwise, usually clockwise, and people check, in this example, we can use k equal 3, and then you have now the encryption because each letter over here we have a different one in the new smaller disk, right? Or in the smaller disk. So you have here the plain text, right? Hello. Oh, sorry. Uh, oh yeah, I missed one. I'm sorry. Yeah, this should be twice, okay? And then, uh, yeah, and then this one. Okay, so we have here is gonna be K, yeah, K H O O R. That's oh yeah, there you go over here, right? That is gonna be your ciphertext. And the decryption refers to shift by subtracting key to recover plain text as we did over here. If you want to apply or if you want to decipher the message, just use this function over here, right? Okay, we use these kind of things usually in a communication between the 2 points, A and B, right? And we have here, we apply the keys to encrypt and to the decrypt. But the plain text at the beginning and at the end should be the same. Okay. Well, so we mentioned previously the modular arithmetic or congruence relations or reminder operations. Sometimes those are different concepts associated to arithmetic or modular arithmetic, right? Well, so the goal with these things that we previously do over here, that we were doing over here, and also over here, was because we want to transform the plain text in a ciphertext to protect information from unauthorized readers. Okay, so what we are doing so far using math to transform information. That's it that we are using. Okay, well, um, well, so let's see. Why matters? why it matters? Key space and security. Okay, so considering that we have a key, 128-bit key, and it has 2 to the power 128 possible combinations, right? So if we want to make a brute force to attack computationally infeasible with current technology, that's a fact. Actually, if we have something like that, that make brute force attacks computationally infeasible with current technology. If you increase just one, where I put that, I don't know, yeah, over here, exponentiation grow. So every extra bit doubles search space, raising the cost exhaustive search. So if you increase one bit over here, then this is going to double the search space. Okay, that's good. I mean, you can say, oh, yeah, we can just increase the number of our bits and that's it. Well, the problem is that when we increase that, we are going to use or to need more computational resources, right? That's an issue. Well, actually, you can also keep the key length longer because it is going to be exponentially uh, important because it increases the number of possible keys an attacker that an attacker must test, right? But again, if you increase randomly the number of or make the key length increase it and just make it larger and larger, that eventually is going to impact in your computation in your computational computing resources, right? Well, we hello, can you hear me? Something.
Yeah,
Hello.
we can still
Yeah.
hear you.
Thank you, thank you. Okay. Well, so we also can use brute force attacks. We mentioned previously over here, right? Force attacks. And brute force time depends on key size, available compute, and attack parallelism. That again, we mentioned over here. It depends. Brute force attacks depend on our computational systems, right? Depending on the key size, right? That's over here, and the attack parallelism. It means that we can increase the number of computing or computers, and then probably we are going to reduce time when we are attacking a system, right? That's good, but sometimes it's not efficiently correct. Okay? Because we are going to increase the number of computers, people who are going to work. Maybe, well, if we just mention another kind of things, for example, energy, power that we are going to use, then everything is going to zoom and increase, or the things that we have to invest to just to make a brute force attack. Well, security metrics. So security is measured by the computational work needed to break a cipher. So it means that again, you use a lot of different computational or computational resources. Then you are going to increase the value or the invest that you are using just to break a cipher or a system, right? Well, so right now we have different or two different scenarios talking about cryptography. One is symmetric cryptography and the other one is public cryptography or asymmetric cryptography. The first one uses a single shared secret key. Remember we mentioned the keys? Well, so that's only that uses, it uses a key, a single shared secret key, which is shared between A and B, for example, over here, or A and B, right? It is fast and efficient for bulk data and requires secure key distribution. Okay, so it means that if I have a key over here, I need a way to send the key over here, and then this guy should get the key, but nobody else. right? So I have to find a secure key distribution. Okay. Well, it is simple. It is okay. It works good for some scenarios, which is good, right? But also on the other side, we have the public key cryptography, and this uses a key pair, public and private, enables secure exchange without meeting, slower but scalable for open networks, and well, so that's those two different scenarios. So we have key differences, and those are the first one we have a private key, and in the second case we have, I'm gonna try to increase size. Let me see if that works. Yes, that works. Okay. So here you have the message, right? Oh, actually, notice that over here we have a key 5 graph, right? You remember this is from math. We have a key 5 graph. So it means that all of them here as well, all of them, each pair has a connection, an edge, right? So those are the different nodes, right? Or vertices. We have 5 vertices. Well, so we have a message over here, we have the public keys over here, and each of these we have a secret key. So this guy will have a secret key number 3, secret key number 2, 1, 5, and 4, right? For example, actually over here. Each of them will have this paired. Additionally, it also will have this public key, right? Well, okay, so if we compare those two scenarios where we have public and sorry, symmetric and asymmetric cryptography, then we have symmetric systems are ideal for encrypting large volumes quickly, and public key systems solve the key distribution problem at a performance. Okay, because now we have two keys, public, and each of the different vertices or person or people will have one different key, okay, which is the secret or private key. Well, one important concept in cryptography, which is these one-way functions, okay? That one-way functions means that we want just functions that we will have this important property. It's easy forward, hard backward. It means that if we have um, over here, and let's see, yeah, choose, well, if we have, um, somebody can change, can see can send the message, right? It means that apply encryption, and then the other on the point B, that guy will have the information, right? But that when this guy is going to get the information, let's see. So for example, this is point A, right? And this is gonna be point B, right? Sorry. Okay, this guy point B. So this guy has to apply an inverse function, as we see previously, or an inverse process to get the plain text, right, or the original text. So we want to make this inverse as we want to do that hard, right? Why? Well, just for people who don't have the keys, right? So this is the process. We have or choose two primes numbers p and q, right? And then do this. I mean, getting n. It's easy because we are going to multiply those prime numbers, and then we will have the public value, which is n, right? And that is easy. We just calculate n doing the product between those two, right? And then recover p and q. However, that's easy, but it's computational difficult. That is that we want with this one-way function. We want to make this computational difficult to get or to do this direction, this or doing these steps or following this path along this direction. We want to do that difficult, right? That's the point with this one-way functions. that we call one-wave function. We want just functions, which is going to be easy to calculate, and it's going to be a public value, but we want to make difficult or computational difficult making the reversal process. Okay. This is another important and similar concept to the one-wave function, which is trapdoor function as well. That's another name that people sometimes call this one-way or trapdoor function. That's alternative. Okay. It has a theorem. We're not going to discuss right now. Just skip, but you have right now the idea. Okay. Okay, so public key cryptography, sometimes called as a PKC, relies on mathematical operations that are easy to compute but difficult to reverse without secret information. So notice that here we want to get this kind of systems. Oh, wait, somebody open. No? Oh, let's see. Oh, well, yeah. Okay, we are going to discuss. Okay, there are some comments. Okay, I think we are going to. Okay, I'm going to stop at eventually. Just let me finish. Actually, I thought this talk just for 1 hour. Okay, so I'm going to stop in 5 minutes, I think so, and then we are going to go to the discussion. Sounds good? Because I have a trip upcoming. Okay. Well, so yeah, we were talking about this, and then this is another concept that we use currently, which is RSA intuition. And the core idea is that we use prime factorization because that is actually that we are doing over here, right? Those two are prime numbers, and we are going to use prime factorization. So with that, those concepts are used in a lot of different crypto systems, okay, or modern crypto systems. Well, so we use prime factorization. We want to, or we introduce those two concepts, public and private keys, where a public key encrypts message and a private key decrypts it in secret prime knowledge. And mathematical trapdoor function or one-way function as well. So it's to compute in one direction, yet practically impossible to reverse without the secret key. Okay? Why it works? Because RSA security relies on the difficulty of factoring large integers, making brute force attacks infeasible with classical computer. It means that RSA is relying on difficult factorization or factoring. Okay. Well, um, let me quickly just make or introduce this quantum computer over here. And it is considering that we have this Shannon entropy. There is one similar to the Shannon entropy in terms of the quantum computer, which is the von Neumann entropy, which is similar to the Shannon entropy. Both are in terms of the probabilities, but in the for the von Neumann entropy, that consider the density operator, which is one operator coming from the quantum mechanics, or well, it's actually a study. Mechanical statistics, which is the things where they feel well the different quantum concepts, but considering that these quantum concepts, mathematical quantum concepts coming from a linear algebra and probability are coming. So those different concepts are coming from the mechanical statistics, okay? So that is in that area is where we define the entropy. So when we talk about the quantum entropy for the information, we call that von Neumann entropy. Okay, I didn't put that over here, but it's similar to the Shannon entropy. That's very important in our crypto systems. You know more about. You have some facts about Claude Shannons and what. So let's see, I'm gonna skip this one. This is about the definition for the qubit, but we know that I know